Hello, here we are recording again in the We Love Guitars workshop, and I've got here Graeme's Jackson 32. Oh god, I've forgotten what the thing is. Anyway, so this guitar's come to me with a few immediate problems, but it's come for a setup. And the first thing I noticed is, first of all, tremolo arm's falling off, which isn't good. Also, as soon as I operated the tremolo arm, several of the strings popped out, so none of these were tightened up enough to keep the strings locked in place. Also, by the time well, there's tons of slack in the strings too, so getting the tremolo into a stable equilibrium would have been a very difficult task. So, hold on a sec. Yeah, you're all right, are you? Oh, okay, lock us in anyway, because I'll be here. Alright, go easy, see you later. Yeah, so, yeah, a few different things, right? Rattly tremolo, strings not attached properly, strings not stretched out, so getting, for the owner, for Graeme, getting it to play and stay in tune would have been a nightmare, because almost well, as important as any guitar, setting up a Floyd Rose seems to be highly dependent on getting rid of your slack in your strings first, and also getting the two anchor points really strong. So if you're attaching the strings here and not screwing these little retainer things, it's very primitive. They just squeeze the strings and hold them, which is a pretty prehistoric way of doing it. But if you don't have enough force on that, then these strings will also come out. Once they come out, they're impossible to. It throws the whole guitar out of tune, and because the tremolo equilibrium changes, then you have to take everything off, and you're trying to tune everything up, and you're trying to balance your fine tune. It can feel like an utter miserable nightmare. So, well, I guess for Graeme's benefit, I'm not. By the way, I'm not an expert on Floyd Roses or anything for that matter, but I have had some experience, a little bit of experience with them, and they're also in many ways a lot simpler. Smoked alder, roasted alder. In some ways they're a lot simpler than they make out. So I'm going to use a very simple method of setting the Floyd Rose, which was taught to me by the famous Galeazzo Frudua, and he's that fantastic Italian luthier who just seems to make tremolo explanations really simple. Now, reversing back to the beginning, in order to set this up, what do I need to do? Well, I need to observe a few more little things here. So first of all, the frets have been levelled quite hard in the past. There's a lot of metal in them, but they've been looks like probably radius blocked at some point to make them probably, you know, to clear up the uneven frets. And we don't know whether they're okay or not. Anyway, seem to play okay, so they have been levelled. They're jumbo frets, there's quite a lot of material on them, which is good because we'll need that to double check and make sure of it. The other thing I noticed about it, down this end, the string height is too high. Now I think I can see some shim material under there, which would be fine, because ideal, because then we can remove some and get this action lower. In terms of the action at this end, it's not too bad. We only have the two outer posts to adjust here to make the action, to improve the action. It's not brilliant though. It's coming in at just over 2mm on the low E and barely over 1 on the high E, so not altogether bad. I'd take a little turn down on this top edge here. Now, to please everybody who gets frightened about this business, I'll turn that down off tension. But so we're going to lower the first fret action a little bit. We're going to lower this action a little bit. We're going to have to take all the tremolo off and get underneath here and have a. Can I get a shot of it from here? I might be able to get a touch from here. tighten up this little unit here. Don't know how well it'll do without being spinning it around. So whether I can hold it in place and do it up. Yeah, maybe. Okay. It's actually quite tight. I still think we've got a bit of excess rattle in this arm, which we could do without. We did have, but it might have been the loose shaft. No, there's a little bit. And I don't think any amount of tightening this up is going to rid us of that. Now it comes with territory. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to end up using up another set of strings in this, and the reason for that is that I've already broken several, or they've come out, and I've had to recut the ends to get them to go back in there and stay down, and as a result they're shorter and there's no more. This is barely hanging on, so I'm going to use a Simon Brooks set of donated strings. Colgate. Ding. Thank you, Simon, as always. I'm going to use a set of 9s. I can use my special. I'll check my emails, but I think we're talking 9s here. Please. Checking my string thing. 43s, that's probably a 42 more than anything. So we are on 9s by the looks of things. Yeah, I would say that that's too far off a 10. So 42. Yeah, 40. It's saying 42.5. 0.0042. Anyway, so that means they're 9s. So I'll get a set of special Simon strings, 9s out of here, which is great for the purpose. Now, actually, you know what? No, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. What am I going to do? Ladies and gentlemen, what am I going to do? I've got to think this the right way around. I'd kind of like to be able to just do the fret leveling with if necessary, with these strings on, because they will make my life simpler. Now I could potentially, could I reduce this with these strings still on? No, because as soon as I take the tension off that, that's going to want to fall back there. So I could do something I already know. I have probably, is this little block of wood in place. Now, it may not stay in place very long. Yeah, just holding. Now, this isn't going to make a lot of sense because I'm sort of thinking through my options as we go. I'm doing these, I'm doing those, take them right off for a second. If all this all goes horribly wrong, I'll start from the beginning and talk through what I'm doing. I'm just trying to, I'm looking to see if I can put myself in the position to do the fret leveling ASAP. Now, I'm sort of, not very successfully, removing strings. Now the tremolo is tilting back, but I put a block under there, and I'll show you in a minute where I put it, because that block's kind of important for this process. And there's lots of different schools of thought about how to tune tremolos, how to set up tremolos, but I'm going to show you the Galeazzo Freddua simple method, and through that, hopefully, you can have a simple way of doing it that isn't going to ever freak you out. So I'm just going to remove temporarily the locking nut. Okay, and lift it clear in a second when I've got all the screws out, or the screws all the way out. Now, there's nothing massively over scientific about all of this. There's a little brass shim under there which keeps the whole thing higher than it needs to be. Now I'm going to remove that and just, for the time being, replace this. Now, if this is lower than what I want, then I can come back and add something else under there to do to lift it up, but not as much. But let's see what we get when we put this back under this way. Okay. Now, yeah, we're pretty good actually. If we get this right, or if this works, I hate that headstock with that angle going off sideways. Ooh, that wants to come off. If we can get this to a sort of setup where I can do the leveling, I might do something that everybody's going to absolutely hate, and I'll show you what it is in a second. Now, if I'm just going to take most of the tension off here a second, and I'm going to do the thing here of lowering down this end of the bridge. So I'm just going to literally turn it down. Now some people get absolutely freaked out about that, doing it that way, because to them there's a view that says if you turn this thing post while the blade faces on it, of the blade of the tremolo, you will destroy the edge of the is my phone buzzing? No. You will destroy the face of the you know, that bit. Anyway, now I've always found that a very interesting assertion, and I'll tell you why. Tell you why in a second. Now let's just dial these all in a little bit, because they need to be sort of mid-place ideally for what we're about to do. Actually, I'm not really talking about the setup. I'm doing something now that I haven't explained, which is a bit cheeky, but and I'm just trying to get back to a place where I can use these strings up. Now if you were doing this, we'll come back to all the sort of little steps, and I'll take you through why it makes sense. But one of the most important things in all of this, that's pretty good without the shim. One of the most important things in all of these steps I would recommend is making sure that your strings are stretched out. So it's kind of, it might seem tricky to somehow put them all on and then stretch them all out before you've set the tremolo up, but it really is important you do that. Now this will now be out of tune, because it always is once you tighten those up. Now, oops, my little block fell out. That's because it's perfectly set. Stupidly, I've already set this up so it's perfectly set, which means my block will fall out. Duh. Right, well I used it temporarily, so we'll come back to the block. So here I have, luckily, not helpful for Graeme at this point in time, but coincidentally now we have the guitar set up exactly like I want it, possibly still fraction high, just a tiny fraction. I'll do a little turn later on next time the string's off. Now all I'm interested at this point, before I go back into setup mode, is do all the notes play? And they do. And I think this benefits from having been levelled before, which could be one of the few guitars that I come across that possibly doesn't need doing. Actually, I think you would get away with it. Oh, well, I'm jumping so far ahead, this is not right. I do apologise. Okay, so just for my, I think I ought to stop this and restart, because I've now got it set up the way I want it and I didn't talk my way through any of it at all. And I'm trying to think where the best way of showing how this is done, given that we're rewinding and going back to the start. Okay. Oh, hello. The floating cat. Take your bum out of the camera. Hello. We went for a walk last night across the fields, and we invited Fatface, our sort of adopted cat, to come with us, and amazingly, without any fear at all, he just upped and came with us, and he went all the way across the fields, including running a gauntlet of the cows and the bulls, and bravely went, oh no, oh god, cleaning solution, he bravely braved the bulls and the cows. Sorry about this. Came across the fields with us, but as we got sort of halfway down, kind of as expected, Morris appeared out of the hedgerows. And he's sort of spending an awful lot of time down there in his own little den, so he's shedding fur as well. You think it's coming back to being summer or something. Of course it isn't, my friend. Anyway, yeah, so they both, the two boys went for a walk together down the field, which was very, very sweet, and they actually get on really well. They're on a sort of pecking order equal, him and Fatface, although he's of course the special kid and he's been here the whole time, and Fatface is a newcomer. Morris doesn't seem to mind, and he doesn't seem to be threatened by Fatface at all, and he's still number one. Right, I think you need to come and sit down here, Mr. Boy, because I have to get on with this. Probably need to restart the video and make sense of what I'm talking about. Well, you saw the video from the start, so rather, even though I have to apologise, it's not a kind of step-by-step logical one. You've seen what I did to assess it from the beginning and to get to where I am currently now. But I will. What I think I'll do is I will just check these low notes, these bass notes. I suspect the reason they were a little higher is they've got a bit of, yeah, I think that will need a little level. I thought we could have got away with it, but so what I've done straight away is I've kind of remedially put this guitar into a configuration. I've sort of quickly set it up the way I would like it. I haven't really done it with any coherent explanation, and I certainly haven't done it in reference to how you would set this up in future, but I will go through and show you that when I put the new strings on. So just kind of park that for a minute. How you set this up into a setup where it works really well, we'll come to once I've done the fret leveling. So I've kind of jumped around and I've decided to tweak the setup quickly without much explanation. As it happens to do that, I've had to set this up, but I haven't shown you how, but I will show you again when we come around to put new strings on. So with this, as with everything else, the core of the setup process is to ascertain what the neck relief is doing. So it's nice and low the way you'd want it. It's about 0.1 of a millimetre. That's what you get. When you bend strings with a Floyd Rose or any floating tremolo, you get detuning of the other strings temporarily. It's just what happens. Anyway, so relief is where I want it. First fret action now is pretty much where I want it. Enough for the time being. Yeah, I'll make it play with this. I've taken the first fret down by removing the supplied shim that comes with it, and now we've got down to about 0.3, just how I like it over the first fret. Now that will make sure that the notes played here in open chords won't go sharp, whereas they will when it's a higher action. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this temporary setup, if you like, because I thought we might as well use up these strings that are on here. And I'm going to just carefully, and it's going to take a while because the strings are already on here. I should have done it a minute ago when they were off, but I'm going to mark up these frets with marker pen, and I'm doing it very carefully because I know it's a maple fingerboard, and should I slip and miss, it wouldn't be the best thing in the world. One of the other things that's probably beneficial about doing this is, whilst this has been levelled before by the looks of it, certainly on the treble side, it's been left with quite a shelf on it, so it probably will benefit from reprofiling, so we can return the frets to a nice arch shape. So they are quite flat topped at the moment, and that won't make the intonation too good, because the intonation point when you have a flat top on the fret moves forward effectively to the forward edge of the flat surface, and that creeps towards the bridge a little bit. So actually the I don't know what you call it, but I call it the intonation point. It just means the intonation point then moves and it's slightly off. Now right now it doesn't matter that I'm painting the strings a little bit. I'm just working my way to cover all of the frets with some marker pen. This is a new chisel shaped marker pen with kind of fairly solid tip, so it's quite dependable and I can feel what I'm doing with it fairly well. So of course, from Graeme's point of view, he wouldn't have to worry about this. You need to just be aware of, Graeme, is what I come to do when I put the new strings on and set the floating tremolo, because that's all it is. It's a Floyd Rose, but it's a glorified floating tremolo. And the floating tremolo, the complexity of it really is only that you have to set it in equilibrium between the pull of the strings that way and the pull of the springs that way. And once it's reached its equilibrium, then it remains happily in that equilibrium, providing you don't change anything else. One of the things that can change, that you change or it changes if you're not careful, is the release of any slack in the string. So that's why it's so important to remove that before we kind of go into the process of achieving equilibrium between the strings and the spring loading. But like I said, it's whilst it's a glorified floating tremolo, it is only a floating tremolo. Once the pull of the strings on the tuning pegs is equal to the combination of the springs loaded, or the amount of springs, and the position of the claw which pull the springs into the body, once that underneath equals that on top, the thing stays in equilibrium. The real trick, as with this system or with a six screw system on a tremolo, or even a 2-point system on a tremolo, the real skill, or the bit that can be mysterious, is choosing how you choose where that equilibrium point is. And on a 6-string or a 2-point Strat tremolo, when it floats, you want it floating up a little bit, because it can only pull down flat against the body, and you want to know what that range of pull down is. As a player, you want it to be a consistent and usable amount. So however you get to it, we can look at that another time, but Galeazzo Frudua does a brilliant tutorial on how. But just suffice to say, when I set a 6-point or a 2-point Strat tremolo, it ends up floating like that at pretty much the same place, a little bit different depending on the gauge of strings, but it will stay there, but it will always be set so that the amount down until it hits the top will always go up the same number of musical intervals. So I would always set it so that when on the Strat, you clank the thing down and the bridge lays flat on the body, you've gone up half a tone on the E, a tone on the B, and a tone and a half on the G. And that applies to the 6-screw. That's a standard sort of setting for the 6-screw and the 2-point floating tremolo on the Strat. On the Floyd Rose, you don't need to start with them canted up like this, because the Floyd Rose has a cutaway or recess which is designed for the backwards movement. And so the Floyd Rose is typically set, its equilibrium point tends to be aesthetically pleasing horizontal to the body, and so you can have as much downward as you can go before your strings fall off, or the other way, you can go downwards a pretty usable range into the pocket before you obstruct anything. Okay, and so the challenge in setting this, once we've done the fret leveling, will be, or the question you would ask is, how do I get my Floyd Rose to end up at equilibrium with the thing, with the plate, the bridge plate, tidally parallel to the body, the top of the body? How do I arrive there? Because you know from experience, the more you tighten the screws in, the more the springs pull, the more the strings go down, and then you tune the strings up and they pull that way and the springs come out. And if you try and do it by guesswork, you can really get into all kinds of problems, and before you know it, the thing's sticking up like this and you just give up and your strings are a mile high. So this is a really good way of, what I'll show you later, is a really simple way of making sure it's we reach equilibrium at the point at which it's horizontal. Now, I've already done that, and which is why the thing is, at equilibrium, it's horizontal, almost precisely horizontal to the body. I've got the action I want already dialed in, both ends, and I've got the relief I want. So this thing is set up already. But I only did that sort of quickly so I could get onto the fret leveling, and then once I've done that, clean it all up, polish the frets out, and then we'll go into setting it up from scratch as if you were receiving the guitar back and fitting new strings. Now, technically speaking, if you just fitted 9s every time, you wouldn't have to do anything, and I wouldn't necessarily even have to bother explaining this. But what I'll do is I'll unset it all up once I've done this, so it's back to kind of all over the place, and then we'll go back through the process so that you can see how you do it if, for example, you changed gauges of strings, or if you inherited a Floyd Rose that was just all over the place and you wanted to go back to square one and make sure that you set it up in a nice tidy equilibrium so it's in parallel, the plate is parallel to the body when it's in equilibrium. And so to do that I'll have to kind of deliberately mess it all up again, although as I said it's currently set up right now the way it should be. So backwards in time, as you know, as I said, I've obviously already set this up with the equilibrium at the right point, and I did it so they can fret level. Now the fret level is going to be minimal. Are you sneaking about in the shadows? You are, aren't you? Fret leveling is going to be minimal, but we'll take a bit of this buzzing off these low strings, which is probably why it was canted up at that end for a bit of extra height. So we'll clean that up on that side particularly, and then on the polish out, or once we've done the leveling, then we can reshape the frets and then polish them out anew, so it'll all be like new. But as I mentioned before, one of the things that will probably cause you a lot of grief if you're not kind of expecting it is to try and do your setup, or your what should I call it? Try and restring it and set the tremolo with the strings not fully stretched out, because that really will lead you kind of around the bend, because there's too many things moving all at once, too many things changing. So getting the slack, and I'll have to show you, I'll show you how that I do that when we come to putting the new strings on in a minute. So I'll be kind of going through that process from scratch, just as you will when you next change strings. Now I will say right up front, I will apologise in advance if this is teaching you egg sucking, as they say in the UK. Now this is a little bit tricky on one of these, because I can't pull the string out of the nut. What I can do is I can use my little wooden device to just slightly spread the strings. It'll sprinkle some dust around, but don't worry about that. So I can just hold the strings a little bit away and just get my leveling tool in there. Now it felt pretty good over on this side, so I'm really not going to expect any major work having to, I won't expect too much going on over here, and I won't want to loiter for too long on this side. I'm seeing a high fret right here, so it's showing me a couple of high frets, but everything else is looking pretty good. I mean, it's starting to cut evenly. Okay, so next one I'm going to switch across to the next. It's going to push itself out of the way. It's not the best thing. I need to come up with another thing. There is a different thing down there, but it doesn't work. So I'm going to use the same setting now for the B track, which again I'm expecting to see overall not too bad, except I'm seeing a flat spot. Now what I can tell you right now is I'm not cutting this flat spot. I'm cutting on top of the flat spot, but the reason it looks so flat already is this is previously leveled. It's a telltale. There's no way I could have removed that much with this 400 grit in a couple of light passes. But what I'm seeing is the degree to which somebody has leveled in the past, and it's quite a good indicator. So now I'm going to prepare for the G track, as I call it, and what I'll do is I'll just recalibrate down the G track and see if the curve changes at all. And I'll just bring this back up, because we've got 24 frets, so that's confusing me just slightly. Okay, now this is a little bit over curved now, so I will just mildly slack off. And that's still fractionally too curved. I woke up this morning with a bloodshot eye for no reason at all. Don't drink, don't take drugs, don't do any bad stuff, man. I just was rewarded with a bloodshot eye. Who knows why or wherefore. Okay, now again, just spread the strings apart as much as I can. I could probably use some other, I keep saying that, other device here, but meanwhile. So obviously you can see the truss rod isn't as long as the neck, so I'm using it backwards and forwards outside its kind of default range a little bit, but still retains the same curve, so it does the same job. And again, I'm seeing going over old leveling, and I know that this plays pretty good from the start. Now, the bit that's going to start working harder from my perspective is down on these next 3 strings. So this is where I'm really looking out to see a new cutting going on. Now this is again, looks a little bit over curved. Oh no, you know what, it's just about right. You have to try it in different positions. It's quite a subtle thing, so it's not easy to spot when you're in the right configuration. Got something on my chest. Okay, so now I'm leveling, knowing that I've got to do a bit of work for the leveling file, and because it's been leveled before, the downside on this bit is it's a little bit harder now to see what's new and what's the previous. I can see the flat spots of the previous flat spots. And here's where the listening and feeling is going to come into it. So we'll play every note. Lovely, fine. Play every note, and then we listen out for any sort of buzz or any kind of sound effects, you know, anything that tells us that the frets are getting in the way. Okay, so now just trying this out. We've now straightened out a little tiny bit, so I'm going to just slacken off a fraction off that curve. It's the minutest adjustment. But I think we still have a little bit to go, and I'll do that a tiny bit more. Still a bit more. I expect we'll go right to the slack point on this one, because it's slightly curved to begin with. There we go. This one never goes completely flat. So now, oh, wrong bit of wood, different bits of wood, different. This is mahogany, this one. Oh. Right, so now I'm leveling the A track, and this one was a little bit fuzzy at the top end or middle ways up, so I'm just going to concentrate on getting anything out of the way now that was causing that, and I can feel it cutting up a little bit new, and I can see a bit of cutting going on up here, pardon me, and a bit down there actually that wasn't cutting before. That's quite interesting. Look at that, much better than it was. So now I'm going to just calibrate for the last track, the E track, and we'll be done, and that will be the fret leveling. So I kind of dive straight into this, partly because with a tremolo like this, it's actually very difficult to well, it's just a different process to the Strat style tremolo. With the Strat style, I would, well, that's true, I'd block it off first, then I would do the fret leveling, then I would set and the polishing and all that stuff, and then I would set the tremolo in float mode. So it is the same basic process. But here I have blocked it off, but it's less blocked off. It's set in, it's now in equilibrium. Whereas with the Strat it would actually be blocked off, so I would just put excess of spring on and just keep it not blocked. It would be locked against the top of the guitar, and that would enable me to do the fret leveling part of the deal. Whereas this one I've actually, because I can't lock it in one position, I've actually gone through the process of setting the equilibrium exactly as I want it. Wow, there you go. You can hear it with your own ears. Okay, that, my dear friends, is that complex process done. And you can probably see a little bit of dust on the fingerboard from the fret leveling, but it's very, very little, and it's only really done us along the edge. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a piece of, what am I going to get? I'm going to get a piece of rubber. I'm going to just put it in there, and this is, I'm going to undo all this, and it's going to tilt backwards, and it doesn't really need to have that holding it in place. But now is the time to remove the strings and slack it all off. And remember, I'm going to go for the tiniest clockwise tweak on that near side post for the tiny downward action. I've got to be very careful with that because I've already set it up for the action I just set. And actually, I think, you know what, I think I'm going to leave it. I don't want to run the risk of dropping it lower than we've leveled for, and then finding I've got a, buzz, and having to go back through the process. It seems counterproductive, actually. Okay, so now we're taking off the old strings, and the next bit of the process is going to be something that I can be fairly confident wasn't done before, and that's re-crowning the frets, or reprofiling, you might prefer to call it. So with the flat spots, as I mentioned, they're more of a flat shape, and then the intonation point moves. In this case, we're going to reshape them and turn them into a nice arch shape, but within the remaining material. So we're not going to lower it any in order to get that arch shape. We're going to cut a new shape out of the existing material, and in that it means that the very top of the fret is going to stay exactly the same height, which is of course ideal because we just went through all of that trouble to level them. So it would be a bit dopey to level the frets and then do some crowning work that ended up with all the frets being different heights to each other, relative to each other. So that would be a waste of time. One of the things I think Graeme, I mentioned at the beginning, is I think that you hadn't got these done up enough. Nobody tells you how much you have to have them done up, but actually you have to turn them pretty hard to keep them gripping on to those string ends. And it, like I said, it's a dopey system. I had a really beautiful Yamaha, 1980s Yamaha SE350 with its own Yamaha style, tremolo, and some gunge on here I'll clean off, like grease and stuff. But yeah, so it had its own in-house bespoke tremolo system, and the beauty of that system is that you put the ball into there, and there was a little hat that locked down on the string, and it just kept it in place, but the tension was all taken by the ball, and you came forward through here to the end. Why these things don't have a loading from the back, and so that the holding of the string is held by the ball, not by a little block pushing against a piece of metal here, which is almost, it's a recipe for failure really, because a lot of people just don't know how hard to tie it up. They think they're going to strip the thread on the screws if they do, and it has to be pretty tight in order to grip those, because it's just a crude force really. It's a crude system, which is a shame for such a precise thing as a precise operating thing as the Floyd Rose. But there we are. Okay, so now I'm recovering all the frets with black marker pen, and this time it's so that I can do the reprofiling of the frets with, and to monitor the top of the fret. So if I can do this by leaving a little black line down the top of the fret, I know that I've taken off the sharp edges on the fret. So I've rounded off the shoulders, you might say, but providing I leave a little black line down the top, it tells me with my arch shaped tool, tells me that I haven't lowered the fret height at all, right in its dead center. See, this is a really wide one, and that's from before, so somebody's really heavily hit on that one, and so it's taken me a while to round that off into a nice shape, a nice arch shape. The amount of, I can tell this has been done before, because the amount of reprofiling I'm having to do here is totally out of proportion to the amount of leveling I actually did, and that would be a massive great stripes, flat spots. Now sometimes when you do have to do this much levelling yourself, you know it, and you know that it's going to take you a fair while to do this to each fret. But this is way beyond anything I just did. You saw how fast that levelling went through. That was the lightest of touches, really. But these flat spots are a previous levelling, probably done by a radius block or a flat sanding beam, which I don't rate at all as a very good method for levelling frets. As you can see, I do the method I do because it's far, in my experience of having used all the different methods, the method I now use is far more kinder to fret metal. It retains much more fret metal. And now what I'm seeing here is the effects of somebody. They've either they've either used a fret levelling file about as wide as that, could have been the edge of a spirit level with, you know, sandpaper stuck to it, and they've gone shh, or probably more than likely they've gone and done something like this. But the interesting part about that is what they'll have created is a bit of a mess, because the truth is this is a compound radius. I was going to double check that because I always find they lie a bit. Supposedly going from 12 to 16 down here, and if somebody radiuses with a block, you will hammer the shit out of the 14-inch. If you use a 12-inch block, you'll hammer the hell out of the frets down here, and they'll get wider, and the flat spots will get bigger and bigger. And if you use a 14-inch, you will hammer the edges up here, and you know. So the bottom line is, a radius block is definitely not the tool to be using on a compound radius. And this, according to this promotional blurb, this is a 12 down to 14, which is fine for a shredder type guitar. It's what you want. You want the radius to get flatter as you go down. But now you might be thinking to yourself, well, why does my method of fret leveling respect the radius any better? And I could bore you with a drawing, but the reason it does, I'll show it you as simply as I can. The reason it does, if I can get you pointing at the board, the reason it does is quite simple. Let's look across down the neck of the guitar. Okay, here's a 12-inch radius at the neck, and here's a 14-inch radius down at the thing, and all the thing in between, right? If I come down here with a 12-inch radius block to sand it, it's all very good at this end, right? But like I said, by the time we get down here, we will be imposing a 12-inch radius onto that 14. That's exaggerated, of course, but what you'll get is it will hammer off the ends before it even touches the middle. So that's why radius block is no good. However, the question is, and actually, by the way, nor is a fairly wide beam either. 12, 14 at the end, right? If you put a wide beam down there, let's do it in sort of 3D cross section, right? You start with your thing there, and actually, that's crap. The thing you know straight away about a beam is it doesn't even have a curve on it at all, so it's a flat, right? That looks like it follows it, but let's say there's your beam, and at the other end it's a flat too. Look what it does, right? You will impose a flat onto that curve at both ends. That looks okay down there because it's flatter, but that's why a flat beam isn't an ideal situation. And also, you'll end up doing it probably 3 times, look, and you'll map the whole of the curve across the neck in 3 chunks. So if you look at it, even if you were not compound radius, what you're really just doing at that point is you're going scrape, scrape, scrape down the neck. Okay, that in itself, irrespective of the compound radius complication, on a standard neck, a standard width fret leveling file is really not so great. It doesn't respect the curve of the radius, whether it's a standard radius or compound. So why does mine work? Because, well, first of all, forget the compound business. Mine works better because it's way smaller. So it goes nah, 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 and a bit in between. It crosses over and blends. But you get a series of takes, and in fact you see I did it in 6 takes rather than all those, but it's 6 at least 6 takes, and they cross over into each other. So you're kind of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But you're digitally, if you like, you're mapping the curve fairly correctly, or fairly respectfully. And so you can see that that tool sits on there and does its thing, versus the one that's like that, trying to do the same thing. Now the question is, why does it also help, or why is it also appropriate to use it on a compound radius? Because from a compound radius point, let's put them together now. So there's your 12 at the end, and then down the far end it's wider and it's flatter, right? There's your frets. Looking right down the end of the guitar, no downward view, straight down the end, right? And what you know is, you take let's take cross section here. You take a little cross section of this and you go, oh, look, in that little thin cross section, what's the difference between that curve and that curve, right? Hardly anything, right? So you see that that tool I'm using is doing that with a bit of fuzz on the edges, and then it's doing that with a bit of fuzz on the edges. And in this little cross section, the difference between that curve and that curve is so little that it practically makes no difference. And when you go down there, you do that bit and that bit, and so on and so on. And so the multiple goes of the thinner tool, the better. Now, you want to be even more fiddly, you could thin it down even more, and you could use the thinnest tool possible, which technically would respect the variation between the two radii even more. But I found that either of my 2 leveling beams works fine. So there you go. That's why I found that this is the best method for a compound radius, which this guitar claims to have. But I suspect, judging by the amount of hammering on these frets, I wouldn't be surprised if, first of all, a block has been used, and I wouldn't be surprised if actually it's rendered all of these the same radius, regardless of the fingerboard. That would be an interesting little test. Quite difficult to find out. Am I thinking it's hit really hard up here? I wonder if they've done it in 14 and flattened this out to 14, because it seems less damage has been done down here, much flatter from here upwards. So there's my little Lieutenant Columbo detective thinking. I reckon they've compromised, and they've used a 14, if they have at all, they've used a 14-inch radius block. That's my suspicion. Now, would I be able to tell really the difference? Honestly, that's 12. Would I be able to tell the difference? Honestly, well, what we'd expect to find, if the marketing is correct, we'd expect to find that this fingerboard is 14 down here, but not up here. Well, it's marginal. But I will accept that it's 12 to 14 on the fingerboard. Now, what am I expecting? I'm expecting to find these frets are flatter than 12. But it's hard to see at this point in time. And what would that tell me? There would likely to be a gap in the middle. Down. I need some bright light, which I can't quite see. This is 12. So these were 14, I would expect to see a gap in the middle. Now, what am I looking for? What am I suggesting? I'm suggesting they did 14 all the way down, in which case these would be flatter than the 12 and I'd see a gap in the middle. And if they were 14, I would expect to see these sit on there perfectly with no light shining through. But like I said, unless I can rig up a better use of this light, let's see if I can. Let's see if we get anything out of here. So I want to see whether this is really 14. There's a gap, and that is telling me that that's flatter than 14. So what have they done this with? No, that's rounder than 16. I don't know what they've actually used. Can't really quite see where I'm. That's close to 14, but it's flattened out the ends a bit. So that looks like it's not quite. Do you know what somebody might have done? They might have done a 15 all the way across. That looks close, but again, a tiny few gaps here and there. Very difficult to say. But being a compound, starting out life as a compound radius, and judging by the look of the work that's been done on it, I can't really tell whether the previous leveler has changed one radius up to the other. It doesn't really matter now. It's kind of it's history, if you like. All that matters now is that we'll make it play the best it can, which we'll certainly do anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my usual thing. I'm going to clean up and I'm going to mask off the fingerboard. So let's give it a little clean down. It will need to clean it down again afterwards because there will be more dust coming off the polishing process. But let's use this to get some of the. Oh, here we go. That's probably not the best idea. I sometimes do that. I will wait till I've got the tape on, because when you have a very light fingerboard, the dust sometimes. What are you doing? You're playing with grass cuttings. The dust can just become a colouring, like ink, and it dirty it up before you get a chance to clean it. This way, get off all the pen will be got off during the sanding process. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the process of taping it up, ready for polishing out, and I will save you the misery of all of that because I'm going to go in and take a break for a minute anyway. But I will get it all cleaned up, and then I'll also polish up the guitar a bit and the headstock, get it all nice and shiny looking, as good as it can be, and then we'll come back for the restringing, and then the kind of bit that's probably most useful to know, which is how do you start from scratch with a Floyd Rose that may not be correctly set up, and how do you put on any gauge of strings you like and then get it set up quickly. And I think you'll find that the system is pretty straightforward. Like I say, there are lots of different ways of describing how to do this, and anybody's method is probably good if it takes a short amount of time and does it effectively well. So this is just another method, and it's the one that I use. So obviously you kind of go with however somebody has described it in a way that you find it useful. One of the things that is a little harder to do possibly is when you get down to the end of things is setting the intonation. Now these have to be moved along kind of manually, really. And there was a little tool I had, and I don't even know if I still need to use it, but I had a little tool somewhere that helped with that process, but I'm not even sure if it helps with this type of bridge or even if I've got it. But it's just each of these saddles undoes and moves physically back. They're set in a stagger that looks correct at the moment, so with a bit of luck that should be all right. But if not, we may have to move them manually. But as long as we can get the first couple staggered right, then we can move everything. It's the only reason it's a little bit difficult is because unlike the sort of typical Strat setup, it's all kind of under tension from that point onwards when you put the strings back on, so it can get a bit of a faff. Anyway, I shall hang this up while I do some cutting, and I shall see you afterwards. You won't believe it, but while I was doing the polishing, and I'm not ashamed to say, while I was doing the polishing and the cleaning of the guitar, I was watching and listening to Mary Poppins. I'm a soppy old fool, and I do like that old movie. Anyway, the original. There is no other. Right, so Graeme, here we are with your guitar, and we don't know, I've undone things, and so who knows if it's all in tune or not. No, if in balance or not. But look at this, we've got some nines, only balls, nines. I'm not using the Simon ones. Simon ones are getting kept for another day. So this is the whole process of setting up your Floyd Rose and getting it floating in the right way. So we've got the action, who knows where the action is. Well, we'll leave the action where it is, but we don't know where the floating point is now. I've moved it. We've reduced the first fret action with this, and we're going to work it from here. Now, what I recommend you first do is you get yourself a little block of wood, and the little block of wood has to be big enough, the right size, so that when you bend your tremolo down, when you put the block of wood in, the place where it rests is exactly, actually that's slightly not true in this case, it's the other side, got some gunge on it, that's pretty close, but it's also not exact. It was a minute ago. What you want is you want your springs to kind of pull this back and stop where it clunks. Oh, it could be because there's this stuff under here. You want it to pull back onto the block and clonk, and I'll show you. That's cool. That's falling right off the back. You know why that is? Because it's got no strings on it. So you can't do that. There's a little learning. So first of all, you can't do that. So what we're going to do first is we're going to put strings on. Okay. So from this point onwards, all the strings are liable to get stressed if we treat them badly. So we want to minimize that stress. Okay, so what I tend to do is I start from the ball end, comes through, if you're interested, it comes through and sort of would hang up on there, but we aren't going to go that far. But meanwhile, I'm just going to line up all the other holes in line so that it's easier to work with and we're not fiddling around to try and find the entry point for the tuning peg. Right, so with this flopping out through there, we take the end of the string, and this is the fun bit, and we're going to get another block of wood or something. How about some foam? We're going to push this foam under here just to lift the tremolo up somewhat. Of course, this is really at the wrong side, isn't it? Do we have we got? Where's it gone if we did? Oh, I don't know, it's been moved. It's been moved away. It used to live down here somewhere. Maybe it still does. Perhaps it still does. And perhaps it doesn't. That's weird. It used to live down here. I was looking for the thing to hook the camera on. Maybe it's down here. Sorry, Morris. Ah, yeah, here it is. Let's do this, then you get a better view of what I'm doing. Sorry, it's absolutely filthy. Drag you over here. Okay, something like that. Right. So to begin with, just get some rubber padding and shove it under here to keep your tremolo back end up. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get a hex key. In this case it's this one, but either which way we want a hex key that works with these little units on the back here, and we want to undo them all. Now if you do them too far and then start moving the whole thing around, what will happen is these little blocks will fall out, and if you lose one you'll be in trouble. So if I could do with this being double thick really. Stuck that there. If I just pull one out on a magnet and show you what they look like, it'll come out in a minute. Okay, it's a little metal block. It's got a hole in one side for this screw end to fit in and keep it in place, and then the opposite side of that, it's got a blank face, which is what holds the string. And this bit the hole goes at the bottom. Right, so providing you don't lose it, drop it in there, push it back, and then what happens is this bit of the string comes in straight down. It's got a bit of a hook on the end of here, so I'm just going to cut this flush so it doesn't pull out the little block. Okay, so straight down with that. In the centre of the block, so the face of the block has a chance of grasping this thing evenly. So you push it on like that, and then you tighten this up a lot. Okay, more than you think. Then, as you get down to this end, what you're really looking to do is you don't want to put it on like that because that's directly on. You want to just pull back. Pull it straight as I've got it, and then pull back a whole fret's worth. Let's see. I'm not used to doing these, so I'm making this bit up. Now, the point about the tuner here is that its job is to kind of hold the string more than anything else, and once you've got everything fine, you lock it out of the sequence so it doesn't really play any more role. But what I've done is I've done the standard attachment that I do on all my guitars, alright, and then I'm just going to cut this right off there. Okay, so we come back down this end and we get our next string, and we do the same again. I think I'll just take the little bit off the end just to avoid any little hooky bits. So we come through the end here. We don't have to do that, I'm just sort of doing that because it keeps it tidy. Through the end here, push that down into the hole, tighten that up until the string, the block pushes against the string. Now if you haven't got enough room for your hex key, press this down a little bit, keep your tremolo pressed down, and just use that to tighten it up. Right, it'll take a lot of tightening before it damages the thread or the unit. Now we're down this end, tighten it all the way back, and then just pull back 1 fret's worth, and then we do the standard, hold it, go over the top of the loose string on the first time round, and then under the loose string on the second time round, hoik the loose string up to help that along its way. And then we have a sort of self-locking thing. Now we've got locking nuts there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Right, but it just keeps it nice and tidy. So we just carry on doing this with all of these things, these strings, and then the next stage after this, once we've got all of these on, the next critical stage will be to stretch the strings out before we do anything else. So we want the strings pushed right down to the floor of this little locking unit, and then get good access to your locking widget, whatever it's called. I think there's quite a bit of give in it. Obviously it won't when it's oh look, I forgot to do that. Look at that. I forgot to put it through. It doesn't really matter. I'll chop that bit off anyway. You can come through this end this way. We do the same thing. We pull it all the way through straight, put it back a fret's worth, put it back a fret's worth, and wind it on, following the same system as before. Yeah, but the next stage of getting all the slack out is really, really critical, and you can do it with the guitar in this sort of configuration. We're not worried about the tuning or the equilibrium balance right now. We're just worried about getting the strings on neatly, tidily and securely, and then we're worried about, I don't know why I push these through here, it's just a little thing that keeps me amused, because then I feel like they're attached and I'm only working one end at a time. Yeah, so yeah, the game here is to get the strings on beautifully, tightly, firmly gripped, right, and again, press down, lift it up, just get enough room to screw that tight, pull it tight, pull it back 1, wind on, hold it, keep it under tension, over, under, and snip. In a minute we'll do the fun part. Once we've done the stretching, we'll do the fun part, which is the balancing, and the, in a way, slightly miraculous part, but actually it's not that clever when you think it through or you think about it. But it is a nifty little thing, just as a way of remembering it, that in a way demystifies the whole process, which many people can run the risk of feeling utterly bamboozled by. So we don't want that to happen. We want this to feel like a natural thing. So we take it in steps, fitting the strings first, nice and tight, or nice and strongly attached. Pull back a fret, wind it on, tighten it up so we don't get too much on the peg. Which will feel like too much now, but it will be fine anyway because it's all taken out of the mix anyway by the locking nuts. So if it runs over a bit like I have here on the B string, it's no big deal. It's a little less tidy, of course, than I would have liked it, but it happens. That happens when you pull back and it pulls a little further onto the thing than you'd like. But hey, well. Anyway, down at this end, put this on. So, like I say, stages. First of all, get the strings on and get them on really solidly and as elegantly as possible at both ends so that they're tightly attached and not too much overwound, if you can help it, because this is what happens. It tends to try and pull through there, and it's done it again, so I've got a bit too much to wind on, which is annoying. Right, over on the first one, direct it round. Under on the second one, it's a bit mangled, but it'll do. Oh, and don't forget to get it into the string thing on the nut. That's quite a lot of sideways force. It's not ideal in my world, but better that it's like that on a locking nut than on any other kind of guitar. I think it's a Gretsch, a sort of vintage Gretsch the other day. There's the most incredible spread at the headstock with no locking nuts, so basically just waiting to drop off. Okay, now just to show you something now, you can do one or two things. You can either let go of your foam here and let this fall back on itself. Some sort of tuning. Who knows? Don't really care right now. Okay, so that's fine. We've let it back on it, fall back on its springs, and now I'm going to do the stretching business that I do on every guitar that I do. Okay, so again, this I advise you to make this take you 15 minutes or more. Now, fat face, what game are you playing? Better not be chewing the power cables, the main power cable, because you'll regret it. Face. Don't. That face, come on. He's fun. He's a fun guy. He's a fun guy, but he's gonna. I'm just worried he might bite the outdoor garden cable that brings the power to the shed. In which case he will cease to be, and this video will come to well, it won't come to an abrupt end, but it will suddenly go very dark. And there'll be a distinct smell of singed stray cat. Okay, now what I've done there is I've started stretching the strings, and normally on a standard guitar I would be able to just tune this up and hear how much, or then tune it up now, then stretch the strings again, and we'd hear the various times it goes out of tune, and eventually you'd hear it stopping going out of tune. Now this is a bit difficult to do this, but what to aid us in this, what we could do is we could put in our little block of wood at this point. I think this will help. So basically I'll press the strings down and I'll push the little block of wood, it's rattling around in there, push the little block of wood in there, and the idea is just to have it so it keeps the tremolo from falling backwards any further, and this keeps it as it looks, just about parallel with the guitar body. That's the size of wood you need. You need something that when it's in there that is as far back as the tremolo falls. Can't go any further back. That's perfect. Right? There's hardly any pressure on there now, so we just want it so it won't fall back any further. Now what we can do at this point is we can tune this, because it's kind of acting as a bit of a I don't know what the word is, hardtail. I hope this isn't going back any further. Yes, I think my bit of wood's dropped out. It has. And that's a slightly difficult bit. Right, that's the tricky bit. I wanted this to not go anywhere, so The trouble with a tremolo is it's difficult to block it in both dimensions, both directions at once. We want it blocked at the front and at the back simultaneously, which I'm not even sure is possible to do unless I've got the exact bleeding right size bits of wood, which now Morris is in my way and I can't see my way to it. Okay, I'm making this sound complicated. Let's see what I've got here. 2 bits of wood here, will they work? 1 wheel, will that work and something? No, maybe that and something. Morris, excuse me, there's a good boy. Thank you. I'm trying, probably going to be a bit fruitless, to lock this in both directions, and I have a feeling it's going to prove my own. Ooh, look at that. I think I've just about done it. Well, there you go. I've locked it in both directions. So the theory is I should be able to tune this now. Now I'm just... The reason I'm doing that is mainly so I can just get a sort of rough tuning on this. Now think about a 6-screw trem on a Strat. Thing about a 6-screw tremolo on a Strat is that you can let it go back flat on the deck and it's locked. Well, there's nearly. Now the only reason I wanted that, and this is pretty impractical because they've got a great big wad of wood sticking out. Wad of wood? The reason I wanted to do that was principally so I could stretch these strings and we could hear the amount of detuning. If you can't find bits of wood to do exactly what I just did, which is to effectively lock it exactly parallel to the body, then don't worry, just keep stretching them 5 times like this, and by the 5th time you will have got out the bulk of the slack. The reason I did this is just to give you an idea of how much detunes each time you stretch them, but it's a bit of a luxury given we've had to find those bits of wood. Not so much. And then again. So, like I said, even if you didn't have these magical bits of wood, and you could just keep stretching them. Now I'm just going to rescue my little block, because the thing about this block here was at some point I wanted to hold this in place. Oh yes, I have made this a bit more annoying. Let's just keep on stretching for now, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do something that will make the little block of wood work from that point onwards. So kind of forget everything the complication I just did. You don't have to have it in tune so you can hear it. I just did that so you could hear the detuning. Do this stretching 5 times with your thumb and forefinger, and I can promise you the vast majority of your detuning will be taken care of. Then, once you've done that, and you're fairly confident you've done it, turn your guitar over. And this is the important bit, right? With your strings on and everything, right? Let's just push our ground wire out of the way. Get a well-fitting screwdriver bit, and I would like you, if I can find the right bit. These are all what do they call them? It's not Phillips heads, posies. I'd like you to screw these screws in, right? It's not a great fit. It's not so much a great fit, it's a crap angle. You don't have much room to adjust your angle with a screwdriver like this. If you feel you can't reach it with that one, that way, get the closest bit you can find and go in with a manual screwdriver. But again, you still find it's riding up over the trem claw, so this part of it is always a very difficult part of the procedure. So the rule here is once you've stretched your strings out, is screw these in and take out, well, screw them almost all the way in, for example. Right? And these are getting really stiff now, so I'm kind of going to stop where I am. And what you'll find is, quite rightly, it's pulled the tremolo back. There's still more it can go back, which is fine. But what we now want to do, we don't really need to do any more than that. What we will do though is we will, by using our arm, which is the best way to move this out, just tack the arm on for a second. And then with the arm, pull it down, don't worry about that creaking, pull it down whilst getting your perfectly sized bit of wood, dropping it in there so it flaps about again. That's rubbish. Get your little piece of wood into there in a vertical position, and then let this tightness pull back on that. And then when you come around the back, you will see that your tremolo plate is now parallel to, or level, or running in parallel to the guitar top. Okay, but that's you keep finding different bits of wood until you find the bit where that bit is just the right size to go between the block and the inside of the cavity here, and that holds it at that perfect parallel attitude. Okay, so now we have the guitar in a good position, but it's in the right position, but the problem we've got is that right? Let me just have a look. Tune it up, let go of that. Let me just look at this. Have I made this more difficult than it needs to be? Attention, hold the drum playing position, tune guitar, right. That's right, acting as a hardtail. So, you know, tune the guitar with it, tune up. Yeah, right, tune the guitar. Right, so with the guitar in playing position ideally, I'm going to tune up the guitar. And what will happen is, as we tune this up, I'm going to take the tremolo arm off because that's affecting the tuning. So we're starting with our bridge exactly in the position we want, but at the moment we don't know what the tuning's doing, so we're now going to tune up using, in the playing position ideally, using a tuner. Right, now if you're like me, you need a start point from a sound. Then tuner. Oops. Go back again. Again, I think I've made this a little bit unrealistic in that. Let's just do something. I've started off too close to where we intended to be, so let's just do something else. Let's take this right out of tune. So let us assume that you've just put your bit of wood in there. It's holding it in the right place. Now we're going to tune up. Okay. This is more likely going to be your experience. We'll follow this one. What would we do then? Let's change it around a little bit so we know it's completely different. We'll put these in a bit more. Okay, so we'll start from here, and where a little block of wood is holding it in the right place. Now we'll tune up. Now what you'll notice is as you tune each one, the next one will go out of tune. That's the normal experience. So by the time we tuned in D, A is slightly out of tune. Okay, back to E and tune again. Okay, now when you've got all of those in tune, you get your little locking caps and you put them back on and lock them down. Now this time, we're locking them down now without loads of tuning instability left in the strings, which is going to be a major improvement. And get the, where have they gone? Here it is. So I'm going to lock this down, and again, like the other end, quite hard. Now this usually puts the string slightly sharp, and depending on the size of the string as well, so the thicker ones behave differently to the thinner ones. That locks them off, but what you'll find as we put this back in the playing position, we're probably going to find a little fine tuning needed. So we'll do it on the fine tuners here, so it's sharp of E, so we come back out. Slightly flat of A. Sharp of D. G's good. Sharp of G. Sharp of B. Now we'll go behind here, or get the arm, and we'll drop out our little block that's holding it there. Clonk, drops out, and what you'll find is at that point the springs suddenly pull this back in a little bit, okay, and suddenly you're sharp, and your job now is to retune it, but do it using your screwdriver, or this one. So we'll keep the tuner plugged in. What we'll do is, we know we're sharp, so we will now detune the guitar by undoing these outwards. Hard to reach, and that's actually stuck and doesn't want to move. How about that? Come on, fella. Well, it'll come out eventually, but I don't want it to go pop in one big go. That's pretty bad. Can do without that. Come along. Thank you. Right, coming back round this side, check our note. G is way sharp, it's sitting on A flat. Okay, so undo some more, undo some more. Try a G again. Now we're G, but we're sharp of G, so a little bit more undoing. Still sharp of G. And what you'll notice is as we're coming back down to the correct tuning using this method, you'll notice that the bridge plate or the bridge bass plate is coming back up to parallel where it should be. We're just sharp of G now, not much to go, so a little tweak on each side. There we go. So we've now reached equilibrium in the correct position. So the secret is get your strings on, lock them down, get them tightened up both ends, nice and tight, then spend 5 goes of stretching them out. When you've stretched them out, you want to start by screwing your claws all the way in, right, as far as you can go. Right, and that will then pull this backwards, and you want to press it forwards and insert your block of wood that you've already tried out is exactly the right size to keep the bridge plate parallel to the body. And then you tune up your strings and you'll keep going until they're in tune, and then you'll drop out the block, and what will happen is the springs will suddenly pull it back, and then you go and tune it, and all the notes will go sharp then, and you'll go and tune it back up to, or sorry, tune it down to where it should be, so the G comes down to G by slacking the springs at the back, which allows the plate to come forward, and that gives you your correct tuning at the correct position. Now if you find you're getting any more detuning when you bend now, well, I'll do this one more time, but give myself one more time to, if necessary, undo these and tighten them, do them up on the freehand, use the actual tuners rather than the micro tuners. See, it's staying in tune pretty well. Slightly flat. Okay. Okay. Now just looking at this, that's the main work done. Sorry if it didn't make it sound too sensible most of the time. It's one of those things that's actually quite simple, but often you end up doing a few different things along the way, like I did. So it's actually much simpler when you come to change your strings. The key thing is to put the strings on, lock them down, get the pull all the stretch out of them, slack out of them, and then do your claws in, which puts a load of weight. It will pull a load of pressure on the plate of the bridge, and it will force the bridge to go like that. Then get a block of wood, bring back up to there with the right size block of wood, then tune up your strings like normal. It'll still be pressing against the wood because the block the spring pull is greater than the string pull. Get it into tune, and then when you've got it into tune, press down on there, drop the block out. The tremolo will pull backwards on the increased effect of the springs, and your job is then to return it to pitch by undoing the tremolo claws at the back, which will bring you amazingly back to the flat you started out with in the correct pitch. It's sort of slightly magical, but it's straightforward once you get it. If the crappy explanation I did there doesn't make any sense, consult the website of Galeazzo Freddua, G-A-L-E-A-Z-Z-O, Galeazzo Freddua, F-R-U-D-U-A, Italian luthier, and search for Floyd Rose, setting Floyd Rose process, and he will show you that exact way of doing it. And you can also learn how to do it with your 6-screw Stratocaster style ones as well. A little bit of looseness in there, let's tighten that up. But yeah, he's a really helpful, clever guy who I think devised a very simple way of explaining it. And if you go to do a set a tremolo on a Strat using his post-it notes method, it's pretty much the same as this, but it's even more elegant. And I love to do that, use that system. So all power to him, because he came up with a brilliant way of explaining it. I just use the system and explain it badly. I did do a video somewhere on my channel kind of explaining why the method works, because this one maybe it's a bit more straightforward, but certainly the 6-screw tremolo system is actually quite hard to explain or understand, but it's beautifully elegant. Sounds good. Well, not the playing. I think you'll agree with me that that is pretty stable. So we have a nicely aligned, make sure that's not rattling, no, nicely aligned, positioned, oh, I tell you, I didn't check the intonation. Yeah, nicely aligned bridge, the correct position to start from, the the tremolo position, and all round rock solid tuning ability, which compared to what it was when I got it, with the strings popping off at the first opportunity, something was not right. Now let's just do this. Let's just see how we go for intonation. Funny, it's quite common this. The E and just slightly the D are forward a fraction too far on this, which gives them a slightly sharp thing, and I don't really know why that is. It's actually more pronounced on the E. Now we need to take that backwards. The problem with this is under tension, this thing is going to probably try and yank itself outwards the other way. So let's see what happens if we do. Wrong size thing. Thank you, I didn't want that one, but I'll take it. Okay, so there we have it loose. And let's see if we got any chance of pulling it back. Wow, that's unlikely. Ow! Morris. Right now, it's not quite what I needed. So what we now have to do is a bit of a rubbishy situation, which is what I don't like about these guitars. So I'm now going to undo this, which is going to mess everything else in the universe up. Oh, Morris, you've picked the wrong time, Morris. Seriously. Oh. Are you still running? Sorry about this. Yeah, you are. Hang fire, Morris. I'm trying to just do something. Hey. Now everything else will be all over the place because the tension's all gone wrong. We should be able to return to pitch. Okay, so now I can pull this back, and this is not ideal. I'm going to sort of do it mixture of hand and or screwdriver, but I'm going to pull it back to where I know it should be, and I'm going to do it up right there. I'm going to do it up pretty darn good. Okay. That's okay, that's okay. The rest are all right. I'm now going to do take it up to pitch. Now all of these are changing pitch now, of course. This is going to mess up my tuning, so I'll get that out of the way to begin with. Good, we got back to where we were without too much trouble. Given everything should be able to return to the same condition. Right, there is one slight problem with this. We know that these go sharp when they're locked down, so let us wind them in a bit and retune them and give us a bit of room to go to drop them once we tighten them. We're just thinking ahead, really. Nicely locked. Yeah, we're on the mark already. Okay. Okay. Almost there. That, I am not trusting that tuner, you know. That's not right. Wrong thing. I'll check that on my tuner inside. That's not quite convincing me tuner wise. Probably should keep it the other one outside. Now what we've actually got now, stupidly, is we've got a whole bunch of things set at different heights. So I'm going to just undo these again one more time. I'm going to set these back, those in, those out, those in. Just want to get them roughly in the same place, because otherwise we're starting off on the wrong foot. And let's do it from here. Now you know you're going to tell me it doesn't work like that. I know it doesn't on a floating tremolo. Let's try it with this, even though it's not perfect. Springs rattling in here. Right, I'm going to lock this down. I'll do the final check of the tuning on my Korg tuner inside the house. I'll lock these off. We'll just fine tune them here if we need any, but finish it off indoors. Okay, finish it off indoors, but there we go, fiddling about the last bit. That's the Jackson Dinky J32, is it? Oh, 32, something like that. Hope that was useful, and I hope it made sense in the end of how you get to the simple thing. Follow the Galeazzo Fredua instructions. He's a simple. He puts it simply, makes it make sense, but it's far less complex than it looks or sounds. It's a nice way of doing it, and there we have it. And the same basics apply here, and that is stretching the strings out completely to ensure that they are completely slack stretched out before you go anywhere near trying to balance. Can you just switch off, please? Holy Caractus. Right, it's going to try and find a station, then go very loud, and then let me switch off. Yeah, make sure all your slack is taken out. Right, I'll tell you what, I'll just help it on its way. Right, switch off, thank you. Get all the slack out of it, and then screws in, lock in place, tune it up, block out, tips back, notes go sharp, tune them back down by using the claw screws at the back, and that's the way to do it. There you go.